and we'll let that capture the event. So welcome back to training. Today's class, Content and Publishing 2, focused in on the Builder tool, that design system for creating new signage content. It's also how the pages of your kiosk are constructed. So we'll talk a little bit about Kiosk Builder as well today. But as with all questions, or with all classes in process, I like to ask if there are any questions that are top of mind as you join training today, questions that we should answer or at least capture before we get into new content. Not seeing anyone jump off mute or any typing going into the chat. So just again, a reminder, keep it interactive. Ask questions as you have them. Use tools that we have available here in Zoom to raise hand or use the chat, or just come off mute if necessary. So today, Content and Publishing 2, main topic is going to be the Builder tool for layouts. Layouts, again, the name of the designs that you save out of the Builder tool, the elements that are available in that saving and publishing process. We're also going to revisit playlists because those can be used as an element in a design. And I'm going to add in that we're going to talk a little bit about the Kiosk Builder today with any remaining time. But that would be more of a dedicated topic in advanced training when we get to those topics as well. So without further ado, unless there's comments, questions, or concerns, we'll talk about the Builder tool. So we've talked about it a little bit already up to this point, that if we go into the mega menu and we go to the layouts section, there will be all of these layout pages. These are the designs that have been built and saved in the system. They can be in one of two statuses. So they can be published or they can be draft. And you see those distinguished here. I brought all my draft to the top by sorting that column. Any of the columns here can be used to sort my content. So the difference between a published and a draft design, one, the things you can do to it. So a draft design can be edited. You can look at the information of it, like its name and its validity dates. You can edit those. You can request that it be approved. If you are a content author and not a publisher or hire, you have to request approval. You can't publish your own designs. If you're a content approver or hire, you can publish your own work. You don't have to request approval. You can, of course, delete. That's the trash can. The item that has these two squares right here, that is a clone option. You'll see that that's present in both draft or published. What that does is it creates a new copy of that design with a new name that I could go into and I could edit, I could make changes without any fear of damaging the original. Because our design studio does not have an undo button. If you go in, you make changes and you save those changes, there's no way to undo those things that you did. So that's why we recommend, especially as you get started with the system, becoming friends with the clone button. Now, if a design is published, that gives you a few different options. One of them is the preview eyeball. So from here in the list, you can preview a layout, and an export button if you are a tenant administrator, letting you save this design to your computer as a zip file. So it could be re-uploaded to your tenant in the future. It's also how designs get moved from tenant to tenant if it's built in one tenant and then implemented in another. The other difference between draft and published is that it has to be a published design to go onto a playlist. To be seen by an audience, it needs to be published. Draft designs are not. So we're going to go ahead and create a layout here. The creating a new layout process, pretty straightforward. You got two choices at the top and then two here at the bottom. Working from the bottom, importing a layout. I mentioned that draft designs that are published can be exported. Well, importing would be the opposite of that, to import a layout. The next option up, import an external layout. That is if you built a design in a system that wasn't the Corbit Builder tool. You use some other HTML system and you saved all your resources and programming as a zip package. You could bring it into the tenant that way. Adding a fixed layout can be useful if you have a screen that is an unusual dimension. So you can lock the size of the canvas to be a specific pixel dimension. The first option, though, is the most common, to just add a layout. It then is going to ask you to pick your starting point. You have a template here in your system already, which is just the meeting room master slide. So if I was creating more meeting room items, I could start with everything that's already here in that design or any other templates that were created. Or I can start from scratch with a blank template, which is what I'm going to do here. When you click that, you got to give it a name. I'm going to call this Corbit Builder Training. I'm going to add the tag Corbit Training to it. I'm going to leave my validity dates blank, but I could use, just like we talked about with pictures, you can add validity dates to these designs, controlling when they start and stop being seen on a playlist. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and now I'm in the design studio. I'm in the builder tool, and I can start constructing my designs. My canvas is here. It's this white and gray check. This border basically just gives me an edge to that canvas. And then I have my control panel. This is where you actually interact with the system. So if I want to add to my canvas something like a text note where I can type, I click and drag the text note onto the canvas, and then I can type. If I want to add an image to the canvas, I click and drag the image element, and it opens up starting with the Media Manager items. So these are the items that are in the Media Manager that I can select. Or I can grab stock photos from Pixabay, Unsplash, or Pexels. Or if I had something on my computer that I wanted to add, I could also just drag a file anywhere in this interface to bring it in to the system. I can go through and like grab this image if I want. Now that image is added in. If I want another image in the design, I just click and drag the image element again. I can also search the Media Manager. So if I search for logo, I can find the different items that have logo in the name and grab that, add it to my canvas. That's how items get in to the system. Now, this control panel has got a few more tricks up its sleeve. You can collapse it. If it's in the way of what you're trying to do on the canvas, if my image is behind there, I could collapse down the control panel. There is also an advanced view of the control panel, which gives me more options, like the ability to get into the actual SQL and JavaScript code for the design. So I could start building at a code-based level of my design if I wanted to. Or getting into things like actions, zoom in, zoom out. There's also a drawing and a template section of the control panel. The main section of the control panel you'll use to build your designs is this add element section. So if I actually scroll down through, this is where all the different types of things you can add to a canvas exist, like tickers, on target. Let me see if there's a on target subscription in play. There is. You have a local weather on target subscription, so it's pulling the data in that way. YouTube elements. There's lots of different element types. We never get to cover them all in training, which is why we have a knowledge base article on the layout and message builder elements. I'm going to share this into the chat. This article actually covers how to use them at a high level, and then each different element that's available with a brief description of what it does. And then you can actually go to the specific article for each element. So that's how items get brought onto the canvas, is clicking and dragging from this section of the control panel. Now, you may have noticed that different elements acted differently when I click and drag them on. Like the text element brought up a cursor, let me type. The image elements, when I clicked and dragged those, it made me pick items from the media manager. The ticker element just did nothing. It just added itself to the canvas. So different elements are going to act in different ways. Some things they will all do in common. Whenever you add an element to the design, it will create a new layer for itself. And there's actually a section of the control panel called layers. So if I click and drag, for example, it's actually going to do something when I bring it. Wait, let's see if there's any videos in the system. I click and drag the video element. It opens up the media manager, lets me pick a video, and has created a new layer in my design for that element. The layers stack one on top of the other. So the further down in this list, the further back in the design. So right now, with this being the most recent item I've added, it is actually sitting on top of all of the other items. It is blocking them. If I wanted to change this order, all I have to do is click and drag the element up or down in the design. So now it's the furthest back, and all of these items are sitting on top of it. So every element, when you add it to the canvas, creates a layer. You can adjust the layers up and down. You can rename the layers by just double clicking where it says like element 01 and changing the name. Like there, I know I'm going to have that be the time once I'm done creating. So I'm going to just name it time now. So now I changed my name. As you work with these layers, if you're ever not sure where something is, you can click the little locate button, the crosshairs, and it animates for you. You can also make elements visible or invisible while you're in the design system. And you can use the trash can here to delete them. If you delete something from the design, it always asks you, are you sure? Because it's going to be deleted. There's no like Control Z, undo. I want that video back. I made a mistake. If I want that video back, I just have to add the video element again and pick the right video again. So that's something all elements do. They create new layers. The other thing every element does when it gets added to the canvas is it creates a space for itself. This little red outline of this text note. There's a red outline on this image and on this image. There's a red outline on this ticker. When I click on it to interact with it, it shows me the outline. If I'm not interacting with it, there is, sometimes the screen share doesn't have the fidelity to show it, but there is a faint blue outline around that item even before I click on it. That faint blue outline does not come through on the actual screens. It is just here in the builder tool for you. So every element creates a container for itself, and through the corners of these containers, you can take different actions. So for example, the lower right-hand corner is where I can click and drag to resize the container. The upper right-hand corner is where I can get into the settings for the element. So if I click on the upper right-hand corner of this text note, it gives me these 5 lines, gives me the type of element it is, in this case, text note, and then gives me the options to edit element, properties, security, remove. That's going to be the same on every element. So the type of element, here it's an image, edit element, properties, security, remove. They all do that same thing when you click on that gear icon. This is a ticker, edit element, properties, security, remove. Some of these are going to be the same element to element. For example, remove deletes it from the canvas. That's going to operate the same whether it's a text element or an image element. Gives you that confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this? Security is going to work the same element to element. What that would allow me to do is lock down so that only certain user groups can edit this element in the design. So content authors in general can get into a design and make edits, but I have locked this element so that only tenant administrators and members of my training group can edit this specific text box in this design. Next option up is properties. This is also going to be very similar element to element. When you select properties, it opens up this control panel to the left, whether it's a text image, a text element, an image element, a ticker, they all open up the same type of options. In this properties window across the top, you can do things like maximize, make the element go full screen. You can start snapping it to a grid. You can clone it. So if I want an exact copy of this item, I could make a copy of it with the clone button. Then a little bit lower, you have basic settings like the sizing. So if I want this to be 25% of the screen height, I type in 25. If I want it to be 20% of the screen width, I type in 20. And I end up with a container that is going to scale itself up and down, depending on the size and shape of the screen, to be 25% of the screen height, 20% of the screen width. That's what it's going to do. If I go into the advanced here, I can do things like give the container a background color, or make the item less opaque. So I can start making it transparent. Can also do things like add borders, move the object around. The attribute property is if this were a template that I was building, I would need to give it a label and say that that item is templated. And that's the properties. That's, again, going to be very similar element to element. So if I go into the properties of this image here, you can see it's almost identical. The differences, because you're saying like, Ed, if it's almost identical, that means it's not. The differences are if it is a text-based element, so like the text note or the ticker element, the properties will include a text shadow that you can set. That doesn't apply in other types. And you can turn on a virtual keyboard in a text space. Doesn't apply to other types. So those two are unique to text-based elements. The others are all the same. Now, where it gets different is the edit element options. So for example, in my text note here, if I go to this text note and I go to my gear and I say that I want to edit this text element, I get these controls that open up that are text-based, and it lets me do things like highlight. I can change my font, can change the color of my text, can change my text size, alignments, all of those type of text-based controls. and it opened up here to the right. If I go to like my ticker element here, and I say that I want to edit that element, you'll see it looks very different. It actually opens across the top instead of across the right. And it's white icons on a black background versus some of the others, which are white background with black items. So they all kind of do the same thing, though. They give you these options that if you hover over any of them, it'll tell you what it's letting you select. So if I hover over this, that's text colors. So I can change the color of my text. You'll notice in text color selection fields, it lets you type in hexadecimal color codes. So you don't have to go like picking around the color wheel trying to match. If you have a color code, you can just type it in. We go to the image here and we edit the image. You can see that's one of the ones that opens along the right-hand side. So different elements are going to have some different editing options. Let me pause for a moment and ask, what questions can I answer so far about the Builder tool?
Does the text element there, I see by default, it's not transparent on the background like the ticker is, but I assume
it was. I set a background color to it.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yep, I went into the properties and I gave it a background color so I could clear that out.
Oh, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have another couple of quick ones. Just curiosity, the HTML module, what would you use that for?
If you have HTML code that you would like to add to the design.
So that would almost be like you'd have a full on like web page or quote like layout within this entire layout here.
Well, the HTML is more for actual just HTML code. So it lets you write the code.
Right. So if I put in there like heading, hello world, that's just going to show up as almost like a text element.
Yep. Now, if you have a website you want to show, the better option is external URL. So if the website already exists, you don't have to write the code, you just pull it in. So for example, the one I always like to grab is National Weather Service radar.
That's the same radar I use.
Yep. So get nice and pulled back. I can grab that website and I can say that that element should go to that website. Now, not every website plays nice like this. And some of the other things with like an external website, like this header is part of it from the National Weather Service. I don't have any options here to like turn that header off.
Well, it seems like we're zoomed in pretty far to the website too.
Yep, because that's like the header of the website. So like I don't get a lot of formatting controls here. I'm just grabbing the website and telling it should appear in this little box.
And if you were to make that like as big as it goes, then would that be basically the size of your full template on your layout?
Well, it would be the size of, in this example, a full screen.
So there's not like a zoom function to like miniaturize the presentation of that website within this layout?
No. Nope. Now you can make them, depending on what you're trying to build, you can make the website actually interactive as you go into this. So I can actually like click and drag the website around.
Oh yeah, what if you do a click control scroll wheel out? There you go.
That zooms the map.
Yeah.
Which I could have done on the website and just grabbed a different URL, but it doesn't change this website interface.
Okay.
Yeah. I can drop it down. I can, interact with the way the interactive interface lets me with this interaction. but effectively, I'm still just pulling this website in as though it was in a web browser window, that size and shape. That, external URL, that's what that'll get you into that item. Now, it doesn't stop you if it's like, well, you know what, we'll get this zoomed in and out at the right level, but, let me turn interactivity off so I can just move the actual item. So it's like, that's kind of how we want the map to look. There's nothing stopping me from placing something in the design over that part of the element. But it's there. I can't make it go away, but I can cover it up with another item in my design. Some good questions. Yeah. What other questions can I answer so far? And I'm going to actually remove this item from my element because it's going to sit there running and might take up a little more bandwidth than we need to at this point. What other questions can I answer so far?
I have one more about you mentioned the locking, like if an element is locked, an author, someone with author privileges could come into the layout. They could not modify that element. I guess that would keep them from being able to delete the entire layout.
Well, they don't get to delete layouts anyway.
Oh, you have to be an admin to do that?
You have to be an admin to delete the layout.
Right. Okay.
Now, they can delete items off the layout. So a content author, like you can see now that I reloaded this is actually, got the padlock there. It's unlocked for me because I'm in one of the groups that's allowed. But this one's not locked, doesn't stop a content author from coming in and going, I want to remove that.
Yeah, and maybe I missed it, but the entire layout, I guess, could be locked as well, where authors could get into it, but not modify it at all, or?
Well, they can be locked away so no one can find them. When we talk about authors editing, it also is a level where content authors can go into a design. The most they can do is save their changes. They actually can't publish those changes themselves. You have to be a content approver to be able to hit publish.
Right.
And actually make those changes visible to the audience.
Right. And so as an author, any layout that you could see in the first place, you would be able to come in and modify and save, not delete.
Correct.
And you could modify it, assuming any elements that aren't locked.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Back into my builder training here. So this is how items come together. Now, a couple items can be a little peculiar. So I want to talk through those items. One of them is text-based elements. I want to edit this text-based element. So I could go up here to the gear, select edit element, or I'll let you know that if you double click on an element, it goes straight to editing that element. So now that I'm editing it, I could click in here. I can change my message. I can also use text notes to do things like insert the date and time. So I want to insert into this text space. I want to insert the time. I want to insert it in a 12-hour format, but I don't want seconds. So I'm going to specifically choose the hour 12 and minute format. If I picked just 12-hour, it's going to include seconds. I hit apply. So now I've got the time in there, and I can get rid of like that typing. I could say time, the time is. Now the part where it says the time is always going to be there, but the time will change based on the player's time, because I selected that I wanted to insert based on the local time zone. So the player is going to control what time that says. Right now, the player isn't really a player. It's my web browser. Why it says 3 o'clock. It's 3 o'clock for me. So something to be aware of when it comes to these text notes is that while you're editing it, you can't move it or resize it. So like right now I am editing this text note, and if I click and drag my mouse, it thinks I am trying to highlight the text. If I want to actually move this item around, what I need to do is get back to the gear, select save element. And now that I'm not actively like editing the contents, I can move the container around. So if that is, my time is, and you know what, I've picked the color that I wanted and all those pieces. So I'm going to go into properties. I'm going to clone this item. So now I've got an exact copy. I'm going to move it to the other side of the screen though. I'm going to go to edit it. Move out the time. I'm going to say the date is, and now I'm going to insert the date. And I want to insert the date here, and I can pick my different formatting options. I want to just go with day, month, year. I want to do the day number, have the abbreviation for the month, and put the year with dashes. Yeah. Now I have the day, month, year. I can go here. I can change my alignment to be right aligned now on this element. Ooh, did not want to delete it. Want to go to save it, lock out my changes. So now I've got the time is and the date is here in my upper corners of my design. Need a background though. This is, right now there's no background in this design. A couple different ways to get backgrounds into a design. You can just use images or text notes and give them a background color themselves, and then set them to full screen. So I could do something like a text note here, go into the properties of this text note, say that I want it to have a white background, and I want it to maximize on the screen. So now I have a white, just solid white item. Here are my element layers. It's at the top. So that won't help me. I've got to drag it all the way down to the bottom if I want it to be the background. Can then rename it like background and hit enter. This one that I cloned isn't really the time, it's the date, so I can change that name. Got my image here. This is the other type of element that I want to talk to you about because it can be have a bit of a learning curve. So this image element, the default when you add an image is the behavior that you see here, which is a cover behavior. So the image that I add is going to cover its container as best it can. If the container gets bigger, the item will get bigger along that axis. But if they don't match, you can see what happens is it crops. That's a sizing behavior we can change. If on this image, we go into its gear, we go to edit element. Here are my image options, things like changing the picture, adding borders or color filters. What I'm specifically looking for is down here. It is size. So we got cover going on. In this case, I want contain, which no matter what shape I make the container, the image will show in full. Auto shows the item as its full native resolution. It won't make it bigger, won't make it smaller, just crops everything around. Manual will distort based on the item's behaviors, based on the type of item it is. So I want contain. I'm going to put this up here on the top of my screen. Now, if I want to get into my sizing behaviors for this, I could actually go into my properties and give it a specific size relative to the screen. It's not in pixels because we want it to adapt. If this goes to an HD screen, we want it to show correctly. If it goes to a 4K screen, we want it to show correctly. It'll adapt up and down in size when you have the percentages. In terms of positioning, though, this is one spot where the advanced control panel can be very helpful. So if I go here to the advanced control panel, click on where it says advanced, and then I select an item, I actually get some orientation options. So I can center horizontally, center vertically as independent controls here. So I can actually center horizontally, putting that logo at the center of the screen. So I don't have to guess. It's just there at the center.
Is there a similar function to like snap that to the full size of this entire layout and then put it on the bottom layer so it would be the background?
Yes, but this would be a bad item to do that to because it's not the right size and shape for a screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I did with the image item. I, gave it a background and then in the properties told it to be full screen. So that goes into the properties and you can tell an item to maximize. And it'll go as big as it can on the screen. What that looks like for each item might be a little different.
Yeah.
So this on target element, you have one on target option, which is local weather data. You can either have it as a data point like this, where I can actually pick which data points I'm going to show. So if I go into the actual data for it, I can change my icons. I can change what I want to show in this item. So I could bring it down just to like current weather. Current weather condition, description, and current temperature. Get my control panel out of the way. So now you can see it's just current. I could add like the day's high, the day's low into like the rotation mix. Or I can take all of that type of information and instead of just having one data point, just start from the beginning, make sure I don't lose anything. I can have it be a ticking, scrolling weather information. So if I go into a new on target, and I select data, local weather, and instead of just showing the data, I want it to be a ticker. So now it's going to animate across a section. I can get in now with it being a ticker and tell it like how long I want it to wait to refresh. Do I want it default or do I want it abbreviated? Like abbreviate where it says Wednesday, Thursday. I can slow the ticker down or speed it up. How do I want to separate the items? Can get into the data again, like which icons do I want? Do I want the realistic or the simple white or the simple gray icons? Do I want text, image, or both? And then I can even get into the text and I can say what I want to do with the font that's part of it. So that's on target that you currently have available to you. It's just local weather. Now, the other type of element that I want to make sure we talk about while we're here is the playlist element. So far we've talked about playlists as a way to say, hey, this should show up on this screen. Send this item out, assign it to that screen. But playlists can also be referenced within another design. So here, I'm going to actually grab my Corbett Training Playlist 2, my Corbett Training Playlist, my Playlist Clever. I'm going to actually grab all three of the playlists that I built in classes, add all three of those to this design. And I'm going to give it this area of the screen to show in. Now, while I'm in the builder tool, it's not going to actually play these playlists. But if I publish my design, I can then use the preview window out here, little eyeball, to actually start running my design. So this is what this would look like if I sent it out to a screen. It would have the time, the date, the scrolling weather, that ticking message, and then whatever those playlists have programmed into them is going to play in this center area based on the instructions that playlist has. So if I want to change what's playing in this area here, all I really need to do is change the playlist. I don't have to go into the design itself. I can just go to the playlist, go into the playlist that's driving it. No, it's not that one. That's what I get for grabbing all three. Also not that one. Either I'm moving too fast. This one. And I say, you know what? I don't want that picture in there anymore. I can remove it. And now it's not going to show up because this playlist is just being referenced in that design.
And this is the way you can see the contents of that playlist because without having to wait for the real-time advancing of the slides.
Yeah, because I'm just looking at the playlist. Yep. This is the playlist programming. This is what's going to play there. That video is going to play for 94 seconds. This item is going to show for 30. This is going to play all of those items. This is going to be for 24 seconds because they're different rules. Now, this item is going to skip unless it's Saturday and Sunday. This item is going to be skipped unless the player that this goes to is like the department is Corbett. We even put rules on this one. Yeah, this one only plays between 11:30 and 8 p.m. We did not put any restrictions on this. So that design that's receiving this playlist, when it goes out to the screen, this playlist is still going to follow whatever instructions you've given it. Now, if that design, misclicked. If this design is what I want to show on my screens, this whole thing, I need one final playlist that actually sends it out to my screens. So I would have another playlist here. I'm going to add a clever playlist, call it Corbett Training Final Full Design to Screen. The only item I'm going to add to it is that layout that I just built. So I go into my layouts here, grab that layout that pulls it all together. That's the only item I actually want to send to whatever screen I want to send it to. And here's where I would select my players. Now, with this type of embedded design, if what I want is this design to stay on the screen while the playlist contents play through, the one unique thing is the time on this element has to be set long enough to let the playlist play through. If I left this just at 30 seconds, every 30 seconds, this item is going to like refresh itself a little bit on the screen, which means the playlist it has is going to restart. It'll never get further than 30 seconds into all of its content. So what I need to do is either give this a lot more time if it's a known amount of time. Much more common if this is your type of design going out to screens is to just set that at 0 seconds. Then you get a warning. 0 seconds means it stays forever. And that's what I want. I want that design to be the item that's on the screen. The other playlists are driving the sections of the design, not the whole screen itself. And that's what I would send out to my final player that I wanted to be showing that design. What questions can I answer for everybody so far?
Well, that was helpful. So a layout can't go directly to a player. It has to be in a playlist.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing goes directly to a player. It is playlists that send it to players.
Right. And you could play just the contents of your well, you could make a very basic playlist, or you can nest it, getting my terms confused. That layout, the layout is akin to like a slideshow.
When not quite.
Or is it the playlist is more like a slideshow, whereas the layout has all the full feature stuff.
Yeah, layout is where you can build a design. You could think of it like building a website. You are effectively using HTML and SQL code, but instead of having to like write the code by hand, you're using this GUI interface to build it up. And one of the items that you can add to your design is a playlist that you have. Like you can nest a playlist within a screen's design. So it's not like full screen or nothing. This gives you the ability to have like sections of the screen. And there's no reason that you can't have like multiple sections. So I could have, let me go in and edit my playlist element here, and I'm going to remove down a bunch of those playlists. So I could have me edit it again. I'll add in just the one. Oh, no, not that one. That's itself. So I could add like my Corbett training playlist Clever 2 to that area. And I could add another playlist element to the other side of the screen.
Right. So I'm just scratching out a little picture here. So I have my player on the bottom. It sits on the bottom. And on top of that, a playlist has to sit directly on top of the player. You can have a layout within your playlist, and then you can put playlists inside that layout like you're doing here.
Yep. Yes. But ultimately, like, how does this design get out to the final player that should be showing it? It has to go on a playlist. That's what sends it to the player.
Right.
But playlists can also just be grouping content together that I'm going to then reference inside of another design.
Yeah, I think that's really important, like to understand, like I'm sure everybody probably does, but what we see here on the left and the right, those are two basic playlists, kind of like in the slideshow style.
Kind of, yep.
But sitting beneath all of this is just a basic playlist, more like functioning as a container for the player.
Not a playlist. This is the layout.
Right, but below that layout, there is a playlist that contains all of this, isn't there?
Not below. Don't think of it below, but in the system, if that final design is going to be seen on a screen, there needs to be a playlist that references that design and tells it what screen it should go to.
Right. That's a smart name you gave it their final design to screen.
Yep. Yeah, like again, like I've seen it used a lot. So it's like you get like left side, right side, center of screen messages, but somewhere there is that final item that says, okay, here's my wrapped up layout. This is what I want to send to the screen. This is the screen it should go to. Yep.
Right. That's like the parent container of everything.
Kind of, you could think of it like that. Yes. That final layout that final playlist is grabbing that final layout. That final layout is bringing with it all of the things that I've put into it, which happen to include two separate playlists.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is signage screens. This is sending things up to be like seen on a wall. I'm aware you have a kiosk, which operates a little differently, and we'll talk more about it in future classes, but I want to make sure we touch on it here at least, because it is a little different. So you can take layout pages that you build as layouts. I think there's probably even a folder that has all of them, but I don't want to take up time trying to find where you're.
It's going to be under admissions.
Thank you. So, yep, you've got a folder here, admissions kiosk. So here are the pages of your admissions kiosk. They are layouts. I'm going to just go ahead and go into one. I'm not going to make any changes, but I just want to show you that they work just like the other builder solutions. Now, this design, I'm pretty sure, is going to a screen that is actually portrait orientated in the final, the final screen.
That's
so
correct.
What I want to do here in my display controls is actually tell the builder, I'd like to see this in portrait, please. Because they adapt. It would look like this on a landscape screen. I can tell the system, hey, show me what it would look like in portrait. And this is just building up the graphics, the items. You can see all of my different layers here pulled together, just like the other layouts we were looking at. What makes it a kiosk is that instead of sending these things onto a playlist to go out to a screen, we are here in the kiosk builder. And what the kiosk builder does, I can even just build another kiosk from scratch so you can kind of see the process. Excuse me, couldn't make it to the mute, so I hope me putting my hand over the mic was enough. So I'm going to just create a kiosk here. I'm going to call it Corbett Training Kiosk. And what I am going to build is a collection of layouts. Those are the pages, the items that I can add into this tool. So I'm going to select layout pages. You can see I have my layout pages here, all the ones that are available to me. I'm going to grab the ones that I've built. So I'm going to say Corbett, and I only have one layout design that's published for me to add at the moment. So I'm going to remove that and grab at least just a couple other items so you can see what multiple items pulling together looks like. So I have my pages here of my kiosk. The one with the crown is the home page. So this is my home page. This is what would be showing on my kiosk if this was meant to be a kiosk page. And then I can add navigation to it. So for example, this TCU logo up here, it is called element 02 in my layers. It's also over here, element 02. So when someone touches, clicks on, interacts with that element, where do I want it to go? I can actually tell it, like if somebody clicks there, I want to go to that page of my kiosk. From that page, if somebody clicks on allergens 04, I want to take them back to the home page. Obviously, these are not kiosk-based examples, but this is how a kiosk gets built. How the kiosk gets sent to its final player is by selecting the player in the kiosk builder. What that will result in is a playlist that is automatically generated, and it'll tell you that it's automatically generated. Let's see if we've got one in the system. Yeah. Kiosk playlist admissions columns. Playlist is auto-generated with Kiosk Builder. What this is telling me here is if I want to make changes to this kiosk, this isn't really where I should do it. This just exists to get all the content out to the player. The actual kiosk here is what's pulling it all together. So if I go in to edit your existing kiosk, you can actually see the pages that make up your kiosk. Let me get to the home page because that was actually playing the audio that was built into that video on me. And you can see the navigation that's built into it. Clicking these items takes you to linked content items. How long, when somebody just interacts with it and walks away, how long before it comes back to this homepage? Well, 300 seconds. So the kiosk builder really just takes layout pages and binds them together into this interactive system where I can do things like click on academics and then, you know, actual sciences. So this is moving through the actual admissions kiosk that's built in your system. So again, you saw the preview. It started previewing in landscape. That is just the default preview is landscape in our system. So if you know, like for this one, it's not landscape, it's portrait. You just have to switch your preview to change the shape.
And Ed, I know this is something that Art Busby, who's on this call, has probably been interested in and doing with his sign. Art, I know this is a quick preview into the kiosks thing, but Ed, would our end users have the ability to build out a kiosk, or is that permission we're going to have to turn on for them?
No, it's available depending on the role. So, you know, it's not available to everybody to be able to go and build a kiosk. Let me double check which user role has the kiosk builder ability in it. System processing, please stand by.
And Art, while he looks that up, I'm hopeful that this is kind of giving you an idea of some functionality you might be able to put together on the screen that you have apart from just using a slideshow.
It would, you have to be a content approver or higher to work in the kiosk builder.
Well, we'll have Kyle and Art work with Josiah on that if that's something that Art wants to pursue.
But you can make a kiosk out of any layout pages. So it's just a matter of, you know, building those layout pages, selecting them into the system, and then telling it what the navigation links should be. Yep. We'll talk more about that in advanced class, but I knew that you had a kiosk, so I wanted to make sure we at least touched on the fact that if it is a kiosk, there is an alternate path for content to end up on the screen besides just being on a playlist. The kiosk generates its own playlist.
Ed, is there any additional content? I know you showed us the layout and element page earlier. Is there anything that specifically relates to kiosk building that you'll have on your site?
Like in the knowledge base?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got a kiosk builder article that goes over the kiosk builder.
Oh, okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure. I know it's already utilizing tools you already have training for. I was just wondering what you had for the kiosk side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got articles for most things in the system, especially at this level where it's, you know, it's a pretty big feature. This walks you through from like top to bottom how to build a kiosk. What other questions does everybody have? Arthur, I'm glad to hear that you think this can have a good impact, and I'm glad that these 2 days have been helpful for you. Also, Charles, thank you for sharing that.
And Ed, we still plan that last advanced training, but I wanted to get the system live before we brought this team in to come do the more advanced piece, because I wanted us kind of playing with active players and people asking questions.
Exactly.
So we'll plan that for this group a little bit later. But this, you're very, like, as the team has said, really great content, and you going through this has been extremely valuable for us. And I'm already grabbing all of your videos and collecting those together in one place for us that I'll share out with the team later on. So we have all that stuff in one place.
I'm glad to hear it's been impactful. I'm glad to hear it's been a good use of everyone's time. And I look forward to that advanced class when it's appropriate for your group. Speaking of recordings, I'll be sending out this recording in just a few minutes once Zoom processes it, makes it available to me, along with today's slides. So you'll have those. And I look forward to our next interaction. There is a question in which I think is a bit more internal. Any idea when approvers will get access to their sites?
So Art, most people will still already have access if they needed to get in early, and Kyle can work on getting you access if you wanted to play, since you've already gone through the more advanced training. The goal is for the early part of June for us to have all the players converted to Corbett, which Josiah is working on the most difficult ones now. And then we will do a training session for all the end users, and it's going to focus on things like clever playlists, maybe do a tiny bit of what we did today. It'll kind of be a much pared back version, because most people, probably 80 or 90% of our users, are literally just using clever playlists and just need to know how to update that process. So that will be kind of what we're doing in the middle part of June, once all of the devices have been transitioned and we've given everyone the opportunity to come attend the class. And then we'll publish that content on the site that we just made live. And just so everyone on this call knows as well, we do have a site that's online for Corbett. It's corbett.tcu.edu, where you've got access to a lot of the content that we're posting here, and the links to certain things. That will be kind of our kickoff to our kickoff site that we'll be using when we make announcements to the rest of the team about where they can get training and how to sign up and kind of what we're doing and how to learn to use the product. And yes, correct, Art. Right now, and in accordance with the message that we sent out to all the digital signage users, what we did was grab content from the middle part of May, and Josiah has built that same content out of Four Winds into Corbett. So any changes that you've made in Four Winds are not being reflected if your player has been moved to Corbett. Once all players have been moved over, that's when we'll turn on the opportunity for people to get into the tool and then plan out training to get them in so they can start making updates to their existing signs. But our goal is to try to make a seamless transition from Corbett or from Four Winds over to Corbett. So when our users start training, they can immediately jump in and start working with their content.
All right. No final questions here. Thank you for hanging out with me for a couple extra minutes, getting those questions in. I appreciate everyone's focus and attention for the last hour or so. Thank you so much. I look forward to our fifth training event, like I said, a little bit later in June. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ed.